I woke up early that 4th of July morning, just like I had for the past 42 years. My wrinkled fingers instinctively reached for Clayton's empty side of the bed. 3 years without him, and the mattress still held the shape of his body. Or perhaps it was just my stubborn mind preserving his memory. The digital clock read 6:17 when I got up. The previous night's fireworks had kept me awake until late, but some habits are hard to break, especially when you reach 67. I brewed coffee and gazed out the kitchen window at the Montclair, New Jersey sky, promising a perfect day for outdoor celebrations. "Happy Independence Day, Clayton," I murmured into my coffee cup, our private tradition. He would always respond, "Happy Independence Day, Della." The words echoed only in my head now. I needed to keep busy. The 4th of July barbecue at Everett's had always been the highlight of summer for our family. For 40 years, I was responsible for organizing everything: the food, decorations, games for the children. But since Clayton passed, things had silently shifted, like sand slipping through fingers. I started gathering ingredients for my famous potato salad when I realized I hadn't received any call about the timing this year. Everett always called a week before to confirm details. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. "They must be busy," I justified aloud to my empty kitchen, but an uncomfortable weight settled in my chest. I dialed Everett's number, my firstborn. After 5 rings, the call went to voicemail. "Hey, sweetie, it's your mother. Just wanted to know what time the barbecue is today. Call me back when you can." I tried Laurel, my middle child. Same situation. Then Quentin, my youngest. Nothing. The uncomfortable feeling transformed into a knot in my stomach. It wasn't coincidence. 3 ignored calls in a row rarely are. Something was happening, and I was outside the circle. I opened Facebook on my iPad, the only social media my children convinced me to use, to see pictures of the grandkids, they said. The first post to appear was from Briar, Everett's wife. "Final preparations for the annual Hargrove barbecue. Can't wait to see everyone." Posted 2 hours ago, with enthusiastic comments from Laurel and Quentin. Everyone, except me. I slowly sat down at my kitchen chair. The coffee grew cold in my cup, while a mixture of emotions boiled inside me. Sadness, confusion, and above all, an indignation I hadn't felt in years. It was as if I'd been erased from the very tradition I had started. I took 3 deep breaths, as Vivian, my best friend, had taught me during the meditation sessions she insisted we attend. "Don't jump to conclusions, Della," I told myself. There must be some misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. The memories of recent months aligned like puzzle pieces: shorter phone calls, less frequent visits, the looks exchanged between my children when I said something they considered inappropriate. The clock advanced to 11:30. The barbecue traditionally started at noon. I made my decision as I climbed the stairs to get ready. I wouldn't be excluded from a tradition I had created myself. If my children wouldn't invite me, I would simply show up. I chose my navy blue dress with small white anchors, a piece Clayton adored. "You look like a ship captain in that dress," he used to say, commanding everything with elegance. I brushed my gray hair, which I recently stopped dyeing, and applied subtle red lipstick. A touch of rebellion never ages. As I drove the 20 minutes to Everett's house in suburban Montclair, I tried to imagine what I would say upon arrival. The initial anger had transformed into determination. I wouldn't make a scene, wouldn't argue, but I wouldn't shrink away either. I had dedicated my life to that family. I deserved answers. I parked on the street, observing the cars I recognized: Laurel and Nash's minivan, Quentin's sporty Audi, and some others belonging to close family friends. Music and laughter floated through the air, along with the aroma of grilled meat and roasted corn. I walked along the stone path in the front garden, noticing the patriotic decorations in the windows, the same ones I kept in the attic that Briar had apparently taken over. On the side lawn, the grandchildren played badminton, too engrossed to notice their grandmother's arrival. I took one last deep breath before climbing the porch steps. The front door was ajar, as it always was during our family gatherings. "Let the air circulate along with the joy," Clayton used to say. I gently pushed the door and entered the hallway, decorated with family photos I had framed over the years. The laughter came from the back, where the kitchen opened onto the rear deck. I took a few more steps, my shoes echoing on the hardwood floor. When I entered the living room, The first person to see me was Julian, Laurel's 10-year-old son. His eyes widened, and he ran toward the kitchen shouting, "Grandma Della is here! Grandma Della came!" The buzz of conversations instantly diminished. I kept walking, now with my chin slightly raised, until I reached the kitchen entrance. About 20 people were scattered between the kitchen and the deck. All faces turned to me. The silence was deafening. Everett stood by the grill, spatula in hand, motionless as a statue. Laurel, seated at the table with a glass of lemonade, looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Quentin, my always talkative youngest, was speechless for the first time I could remember. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I hope I'm not too late for the annual family barbecue." It was Briar who finally broke the awkward silence. "Della, what a wonderful surprise." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Please, come in. We were just getting started." "Thank you, Briar. I brought my potato salad, the family recipe, as always." I raised the container I was carrying like a shield. Everett finally moved, placing the spatula on the small table beside the grill and walking toward me. His face was a mixture of guilt and poorly disguised irritation. "Mom, we didn't know you were coming." His voice tried to sound casual, but I knew my son too well to be fooled. "Why didn't you call ahead?" "I did call, dear. I called all of you, actually." I kept my voice low, controlled. No one answered or returned my calls. The other guests began to discreetly disperse, finding excuses to go to the yard or refresh their drinks, leaving mainly the immediate family in the kitchen. The embarrassment was palpable. Quentin approached, always the family diplomat. "Grandma, glad you came? Let me take that for you." He took the potato salad bowl, but his eyes avoided mine. "Am I interrupting something?" I asked directly, looking each of my children in the eye. "Because I get the impression I wasn't invited to this year's barbecue. The barbecue I've organized for over 4 decades. The silence confirmed my suspicions before any words were spoken. "We thought maybe you'd want to rest this year," Laurel finally spoke, always the intellectual trying to choose the right words. "You mentioned being tired last month. Tired of cleaning up alone after everyone leaves. Not tired of being with my family on the holiday your father and I made into a tradition." I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. Nash, Laurel's husband, a usually reserved man, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Kids, why don't you go play outside for a moment?" He nodded to the grandchildren, who were watching the scene with curious eyes. When the children reluctantly left, I felt a chair being pushed toward me by Thaddeus Kinsella, my longtime neighbor who had apparently been invited to the event from which I was excluded. The irony didn't escape me. "Sit down, Della," he said gently, his hand lightly brushing my shoulder in a gesture of support. Thaddeus had grown closer in recent months, since we started working together in the local community garden. I sat down, grateful for the support, even if it came from outside the family circle. "Is someone going to tell me what's going on here? Why my own family decided to exclude me from a tradition that I started?" Everett, Laurel, and Quentin exchanged glances, a silent conversation I couldn't decipher. Finally, Everett sighed deeply and pulled up a chair to sit across from me. "Mom, it's not easy to say this, but—" He hesitated, his face reflecting internal conflict. "Things have been difficult with you lately." "Difficult?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "Since Dad passed away," Laurel continued, joining the conversation, "you've been different, more critical, more intrusive in our lives. Harder to deal with," Quentin added quietly, and those words hit me like a slap. "You're telling me you excluded me because I'm inconvenient?" The disbelief in my voice was palpable. "After everything I sacrificed for this family?" "It's not that, Mom," Everett tried to explain. "It's just that you seem dissatisfied with everything we do. Nothing is good enough. The way Briar organizes the house, the school we chose for the kids, the jobs we have. You criticized my restaurant in front of a food critic," Quentin interrupted, the hurt evident in his voice. "You said the appetizer was too salty and that I should rethink the menu." "I was just being honest," I responded defensively, though a small voice inside me acknowledged that perhaps my comment had been unnecessarily harsh. "You told my students, during a campus visit, that I should be teaching classical literature instead of wasting my talent on contemporary cultural studies," Laurel added, crossing her arms. "I've worked 15 years to build my reputation in that field." The accusations continued, events from the past 3 years resurfacing like ghosts I didn't know I had created. Comments I considered frank, they interpreted as destructive criticism. Advice I offered out of love, they received as interference. Standards I had maintained for decades, they saw as rigidity and inability to adapt to changing times. As they spoke, I realized they were describing a person I didn't recognize, but who, somehow, I had become. Had the pain of losing Clayton transformed into a bitterness that I projected onto those I loved most? "You should have talked to me," I finally said, my voice softer. "Instead of simply excluding me." "We tried, Mom," Everett replied. "Many times, but you always change the subject or say we're overreacting." A heavy silence fell over us. Outside, daytime fireworks were exploding, celebrating a nation's independence, while inside this house, I felt more dependent and vulnerable than ever. "I understand," I finally said, standing up. I straightened my dress with dignity, the dress Clayton loved. "I'll let you continue your celebration." "Mom, you don't have to leave," Laurel protested, looking remorseful for the first time. "You're already here, stay." "For what? To be tolerated? To make everyone uncomfortable?" I shook my head. "I'd rather keep what's left of my dignity." Thaddeus stood up beside me. "May I accompany you, Della?" I nodded, grateful for his presence. As we walked toward the door, Quentin ran after us. "Grandma, wait!" He caught up with us and placed the potato salad bowl in my hands. "Take this with you. It's your recipe. It wouldn't be right for us to keep it." I looked at the bowl, then at my youngest son, the temperamental chef who had inherited my passion for food. In that moment, I saw beyond the well-trimmed beard and adult face. I saw the boy who cried when he burned his fingers on the stove, determined to learn to cook like his mother. "Keep it," I said, returning the bowl. "It's a family recipe, and you all remain my family, even when you hurt me." I saw his eyes fill with tears as I turned to leave. I didn't look back as I walked through the entryway, even when I heard Everett call my name once. My feet felt heavy as I descended the porch steps. Thaddeus remained silent as we walked to my car, a quiet support that I appreciated more than he could imagine. "Are you okay to drive?" he asked when we reached my blue Subaru, another gift from Clayton that I kept impeccably maintained. "I am," I replied, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "Thank you for walking me out." "Della." He hesitated, his gentle face marked with concern. "Families are complicated. Believe me, I know that. But what just happened in there? That might be a beginning, not an end." "A beginning?" I asked, confused. "Sometimes we need to see our reflection in others' eyes to really see ourselves." He smiled sadly. "Perhaps today was that mirror for all of you." His words stayed with me as I drove back home, streets decorated with American flags passing like colorful blurs through my teary eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't just feeling Clayton's absence. I was feeling the absence of myself, of the woman I was before grief transformed me into someone my own children didn't want around. As I entered my silent house, I was greeted by the emptiness I had grown accustomed to ignoring. But today, the silence seemed to shout truths I wasn't ready to hear. I walked to the living room shelf and picked up a dusty picture frame. It was a photo from the last Independence Day with Clayton alive. We were all in Everett's backyard, genuine smiles on our faces, united by the simple joy of being together. "What happened to us, Clayton?" I murmured to the photograph. "What happened to me?" I slowly sat on the sofa, still holding the photo, when my phone rang. For a moment, my heart leaped with hope that it was one of my children. But the name on the display was Vivienne Blackwood, my oldest friend. "Della, how was the barbecue?" Her animated voice floated through the device. I tried to answer, but the words got caught in my throat, replaced by a sob I couldn't contain. "I'm coming over," Vivienne said immediately, needing no explanations. "Don't move." As I waited for my friend, I looked again at the photograph in my hands and made a decision. If I had become someone I didn't even recognize, then it was time to rediscover who Della Hargrove really was and who she could still be. In the sky outside, the first evening fireworks began to explode, celebrating a nation's freedom. Inside me, something was also beginning to break free. The determination to reclaim not just my place at the family table, but also the woman I had lost in the grieving process. Vivian arrived at my door 20 minutes later with a bottle of Merlot and a determination that had carried her through 2 divorces and a successful career as the first female bank manager in our county. Her silver hair was pulled back in a stylish twist, and despite the July heat, she looked immaculate in her linen pants and turquoise blouse. "Start from the beginning," she commanded, after pouring us each a glass of wine. We sat on my back porch, watching fireflies begin their evening dance in the yard that Clayton had meticulously landscaped over decades. I told her everything: the ignored calls, the Facebook post, the silence that greeted me, and the painful accusations that followed. Vivian listened without interrupting, her expression shifting between outrage and thoughtfulness. "So they essentially told you that you've become a bitter old woman who criticizes everything they do," she summarized when I finished, ever direct. "And they didn't invite you because you're too difficult to have around." "That about sums it up," I replied, taking a long sip of wine. The rich liquid burned slightly going down, but the warmth was comforting. "Well?" Vivian raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Is it true?" I nearly choked on my wine. "Whose side are you on?" "Yours, Della. Always yours." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "But friendship means honesty. So I'm asking you, have you become more critical since Clayton died?" I wanted to deny it outright, but Vivian's steady gaze demanded reflection. Had I? The faces of my children flashed in my mind. The hurt in Quentin's eyes when I criticized his restaurant, the tightness around Laurel's mouth when I questioned her career choices, Everett's resigned sighs when I rearranged things in his home. "Maybe," I admitted quietly. "I didn't realize I was doing it." "Grief changes us," Vivian said softly. "Sometimes it makes us sharper, more critical. We try to control everything because we couldn't control the one thing that mattered most." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Since Clayton's death, I had channeled my pain into fixing everyone else's lives, imposing my standards as if perfect potato salad and properly arranged furniture could somehow compensate for the gaping hole in my existence. "But they should have talked to me," I insisted, tears threatening again. "Not excluded me from a family tradition." "Yes, they should have," Vivian agreed. "That was cowardly and hurtful. But Della, honey, would you have really listened if they had tried?" The question hung in the humid summer air. A distant boom of fireworks punctuated the silence. "I don't know," I finally admitted. "I'd like to think so, but you're stubborn as hell," Vivian finished with a fond smile. "Always have been. Clayton was the only one who could really get through to you when you dug your heels in." She was right. Clayton had been my mirror, my gentle corrective force when I became too rigid or demanding. Without him, I'd lost that crucial reflection of myself. "So what do I do now?" I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted. "How do I fix this?" Vivian refilled our glasses, her movements deliberate. "First, you need to decide if you want to fix it. Your kids hurt you deeply today. You'd be entitled to let them stew in their guilt for a while." "They're my children, Viv," I said simply. "Of course I want to fix it." "Then you start by listening," she said firmly. "Really listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak or thinking about how they're wrong. And maybe," she hesitated, "maybe what? Maybe you start figuring out who Della Hargrove is without Clayton." Her voice was gentle but firm. "It's been 3 years, sweetie. You've been existing, not living, criticizing others because you're not sure who you are anymore." The truth of her words stung. I had built my identity around being Clayton's wife, Everett Laurel and Quentin's mother, the Hargrove family matriarch. With the children grown and Clayton gone, who was I? "I don't know how to do that," I whispered. "None of us do," Vivian chuckled softly. "We make it up as we go along, but I have some ideas, starting with that community garden project. Thaddeus mentioned you've been helping out." I felt my cheeks warm at the mention of Thaddeus. "Just a few hours a week. He's the real gardener. I mostly pull weeds." "He's a good man," Vivian observed casually, though her eyes were sharp. "And he clearly cares about you." "He's a friend," I said firmly. "Nothing more." "If you say so." Vivian shrugged, but her expression remained knowing. "My point is, that garden is something new in your life, something that has nothing to do with Clayton or your children, something just for Della." I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. The community garden was the one place where no one knew me as Clayton's widow or the Hargrove matriarch. There, I was just Della, learning about native plants and soil composition from Thaddeus and the other volunteers. "I'm going to stay tonight," Vivian announced, standing up decisively. "We'll drink this excellent wine, watch those ridiculous home renovation shows you pretend not to love, and tomorrow we start Operation Della 2.0. I couldn't help but laugh. "That sounds ominous." "It should," she replied with a mischievous glint. "I've been waiting decades for you to have time for adventures. Clayton got you for 50 years. Now it's my turn." We spent the evening exactly as Vivian had prescribed, and for a few hours I managed to push aside the pain of the day. But when I climbed into bed that night, alone in the room where Clayton and I had shared countless intimate conversations and quiet moments, the hurt rushed back like a physical presence. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, checking it one last time. Still no calls or messages from my children. Not even a text asking if I'd gotten home safely. The realization sent a fresh wave of pain through me. Had I really become so difficult that they felt relief rather than guilt at my departure? Morning came with the soft golden light of high summer filtering through my bedroom curtains. I found Vivian already awake, making coffee in my kitchen with the practiced ease of someone who had done so many times before. "I've been thinking," she announced, placing a steaming mug in front of me. "You need to write them letters." "Letters?" I echoed, my brain still foggy with sleep. "Yes, actual handwritten letters to each of your children," she clarified. "Email is too easy to fire back an angry response, and in person is too volatile right now. Letters give you the chance to really think about what you want to say, and it gives them space to process without feeling ambushed." The idea had merit. I had always expressed myself better in writing, a trait Laurel had inherited. In fact, some of my most meaningful conversations with Clayton had been through notes we left for each other during our busy years of child-rearing. "What would I say?" I asked, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "The truth," Vivian said simply. "That you're sorry if you've been overly critical, that you miss them, that you want to understand how to be better, and that you're hurt by what happened yesterday." "That sounds vulnerable," I said, discomfort rising at the thought. "That's the point," Vivian countered. "They need to see that you're human, Della, not just the intimidating matriarch who always knows best." After breakfast, Vivian left for her water aerobics class, but not before extracting a promise that I would at least start drafting the letters. I spent the morning at my desk, starting and discarding multiple versions. How do you tell your children that you're sorry for who you've become without making them feel guilty for pointing it out? How do you express hurt without sounding accusatory? By noon, I had 3 letters that felt honest without being defensive. I sealed them in envelopes but didn't address them yet. This task felt too important to rush. My phone chimed with a message. Surprisingly, it was from Thaddeus. "Community garden workday today, 1 to 4 p.m. Extra hands needed for the new irrigation system. Hope to see you there." I hesitated only briefly before replying, "I'll be there." Getting dirt under my nails seemed preferable to sitting alone with my thoughts, waiting for children who might never call. The community garden occupied a formerly vacant lot between the elementary school and the senior center. What had once been a dumping ground for old tires and fast food wrappers was now a thriving patchwork of vegetable plots, flower beds, and a small orchard of dwarf fruit trees. Thaddeus, with his background in landscape architecture, had designed the space to be both beautiful and functional. He was kneeling beside the herb spiral when I arrived, his weathered hands carefully placing stones to create a new tier. At 70, Thaddeus moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had spent a lifetime working with his body. His silver hair was covered by a faded baseball cap, and his tan skin testified to countless hours in the sun. "You came," he said, standing up with a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. No mention of yesterday's debacle, no awkward questions about how I was feeling, just simple pleasure at my presence. "I said I would," I replied, suddenly self-conscious. I had changed into gardening clothes, well-worn jeans, and one of Clayton's old button-down shirts that I couldn't bear to give away. But I'd still taken extra care with my appearance, a fact that I chose not to examine too closely. "We're installing drip irrigation today," Thaddeus explained, leading me to where several other volunteers were already working. The drought's getting worse every summer, and we need to conserve water. For the next 3 hours, I lost myself in physical labor. Thaddeus taught me how to connect the irrigation tubing, position the emitters near plant roots, and cover the lines with mulch to prevent evaporation. The work was precise and absorbing, requiring just enough concentration to quiet my troubled mind. "You're good at this," Thaddeus observed as we finished a row of tomato plants. "You have an eye for detail." "Years of organizing school fundraisers and community events," I replied with a small smile. "I've always been particular about doing things properly." "It's a valuable quality," he said, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana, "though sometimes exhausting for the person who has it." I looked at him sharply, wondering if this was his way of referencing what my children had said. But his expression held no judgment, only understanding. "It can be lonely," I admitted softly, "always being the one insisting on standards that others find excessive." Thaddeus nodded, his blue eyes thoughtful. "My late wife, Eleanor, used to say I was selectively perfectionist. I could spend 3 hours getting the curve of a garden bed exactly right, but couldn't remember to put my coffee mug in the dishwasher." I laughed, recognizing the dynamic. Clayton was the same way, meticulous about his woodworking, but oblivious to laundry that needed folding. "Maybe we all have our areas where we need control," Thaddeus suggested, "and areas where we can let go. The trick is figuring out which is which." Something about his words resonated deeply. Had I lost the ability to distinguish between what mattered and what didn't? Was I clinging to control over insignificant details because I couldn't control the biggest loss of my life? "I wrote letters to my children this morning," I found myself saying. "About what happened yesterday." Thaddeus nodded encouragingly but didn't pry. "I'm not sure whether to mail them or deliver them in person," I continued, uncertain why I was sharing this with him, but finding relief in doing so. "What feels right to you?" he asked simply. "Nothing feels right," I admitted. "Everything about this situation feels wrong." "Then maybe start with the option that feels least wrong," he suggested pragmatically. "Sometimes that's the best we can do." The garden workday ended with lemonade and cookies under the shade of a large oak tree. I found myself surrounded by neighbors of all ages, retirees like Thaddeus and me, young parents with children helping in their own small ways, teenagers fulfilling community service hours. No one here had expectations of who I should be or memories of who I had been. The anonymity was liberating. As I helped clean up, Thaddeus approached me again. "A few of us usually go to Millbrook Diner after garden days. Nothing fancy, just burgers and conversation. Would you like to join us?" My instinct was to decline. Social outings had felt exhausting since Clayton died, full of pitying looks and awkward conversations. But today, covered in honest dirt and pleasantly tired from physical work, the idea held appeal. "Yes," I said, surprising myself. "I'd like that." The diner was a Montclair institution, virtually unchanged since the 1950s, with its chrome fixtures and vinyl booths. Our group of 6 gardeners claimed a large corner table, and I found myself seated between Thaddeus and Maria Chen, a retired nurse with a passion for native plants. The conversation flowed easily, centered mostly around gardening successes and failures, local politics, and gentle gossip about mutual acquaintances. I contributed occasionally, but mostly listened, realizing how long it had been since I'd engaged in casual social interaction that didn't revolve around family obligations or community responsibilities I'd shouldered for decades. "You're quiet," Thaddeus observed softly, as the others debated the merits of different tomato varieties. "Just enjoying the conversation," I replied. "It's nice to talk about something other than—" I trailed off, unsure how to articulate it. "Other than being somebody's mother or widow?" he suggested with unexpected insight. "Exactly," I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "How did you know?" He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Eleanor's been gone 7 years now. Took me about 3 to remember I was more than just a widower. Another 2 to actually believe it. 5 years, I mused. That's a long time. Grief doesn't follow a schedule," he said simply. "But it does eventually make room for other things if you let it." As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. My heart jumped when I saw the display. "Laurel." "Excuse me," I said to the table, sliding out of the booth. I need to take this. I stepped outside the diner, the evening air still warm with July heat. Hello? Mom. Laurel's voice sounded strained. We wanted to check that you got home okay yesterday. We? I asked, noticing she was speaking for all of them. Everett, Quentin, and me, she confirmed. We've been talking about yesterday. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral though my pulse had quickened. Yes, I got home fine. Vivian came over. That's good. An awkward pause followed. Mom, what happened yesterday? It wasn't planned that way. We didn't mean for you to find out like that. How was I supposed to find out? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Were you planning to tell me at all? Another pause. Honestly, no. We thought we'd just have this one event without the stress. The blunt admission hurt, even though I'd already known the truth. I see. But we handled it badly, Laurel continued, her academic precision evident even in apology. We should have talked to you directly about our concerns instead of excluding you. It wasn't quite the heartfelt apology I might have hoped for, but it was something, an acknowledgement at least, that they had hurt me. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. I've been doing some thinking too, about what you all said. You have? She sounded surprised. Yes. In fact, I've written letters to each of you. I was planning to mail them tomorrow. Letters? Now she sounded intrigued. Laurel had always appreciated the written word. I express myself better in writing, I explained, and I thought you might all need some space to process without feeling put on the spot. That's actually really thoughtful, Mom. The surprise in her voice stung a little. I'm capable of thoughtfulness, you know, I replied, more sharply than intended. I know, I'm sorry, she backpedaled quickly. It's just not our usual way of handling conflict. She was right. The Hargrove method of conflict resolution typically involved loud discussions, stubborn silences, and eventually grudging reconciliations, usually orchestrated by Clayton, who had a gift for getting both sides to bend without feeling they'd lost. I'm trying something new, I said simply. Would you consider bringing the letters in person? Laurel asked after a moment. Everett suggested we meet, all of us, without spouses or kids, just to talk. The prospect was simultaneously appealing and terrifying. When? Tomorrow evening? Quentin's restaurant is closed on Mondays. We could meet there. Neutral territory. I considered the offer. The letters were ready, and waiting another day to mail them wouldn't change anything. Meeting in person would be harder emotionally, but might facilitate real conversation in a way that letters alone couldn't. All right, I agreed. What time? 7? Quentin will cook. Her voice held a tentative hope that made my throat tighten. I'll be there, I promised. When I returned to the table, the group was preparing to leave. I caught Thaddeus watching me with concern in his eyes. Everything okay? He asked quietly as we walked to the parking lot. My daughter called, I explained. We're meeting tomorrow to talk about what happened. That's promising, he said with genuine warmth. A good sign they want to work things out. Or they want to explain in greater detail why I'm so difficult, I said, only half joking. Thaddeus stopped walking and turned to face me directly. Della, may I offer an observation, as someone who's only known you a short while? I nodded, curious. You're quick to assume negative intentions, he said gently. Your first thought seems to be that people want to criticize or exclude you. My instinct was to deny it or defend myself, but the events of the past 2 days had made me more receptive to uncomfortable truths. You think I'm paranoid? Not paranoid, he clarified. Just anticipating hurt, which makes sense if you've been feeling invisible since Clayton died. His perception was unnervingly accurate. Since becoming a widow, I had felt increasingly pushed to the margins of my own life, no longer part of a couple, no longer needed as an active mother, my community roles gradually taken over by younger women with more energy and fresher ideas. How did you get through it? I asked suddenly. After Eleanor died? Thaddeus considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Not perfectly, he admitted. I withdrew at first. Then I tried to control everything and everyone around me. Made my kids crazy. He smiled ruefully. Eventually, I realized I needed to build something new. Not cling to what was gone. The garden helped. New friends helped. Being honest about how lost I felt helped most of all. As I drove home that evening, his words echoed in my mind. build something new. The concept was both frightening and liberating. For 45 years, my life had been defined by my roles as Clayton's wife and my children's mother. Who would I be if I defined myself? That night, I took out the letters I had written and read them again. They were honest, but still somewhat defensive, focusing on my hurt feelings while acknowledging my critical tendencies almost as an afterthought. I decided to rewrite them, this time leading with the recognition of my own flaws before addressing how their actions had affected me. As I reworked the letters by lamplight, I felt a strange sense of possibility opening up, as if by acknowledging my imperfections, I was creating space for growth. Tomorrow's meeting with my children would be difficult, but for the first time since Clayton's death, I felt like I was moving towards something, rather than simply existing in the shadow of loss. Outside my window, a few late fireworks still punctuated the night sky, stragglers celebrating independence a day late. I thought about what independence might mean for me now, not the absence of connection, but the freedom to redefine who I was and how I related to those I loved. Tomorrow would be a first step, however uncertain. Quentin's restaurant, Hearth and Vine, was empty when I arrived, 15 minutes early, as was my habit. Located in a renovated Victorian house on the edge of Montclair's downtown, the restaurant reflected my youngest son's philosophy: respect for tradition with thoughtful, contemporary updates. The original woodwork and stained glass windows remained intact, while the kitchen had been modernized with state-of-the-art equipment. I entered through the side door, as instructed by Laurel. The main dining room was dimly lit, chairs upturned on tables, but light and soft music spilled from the private dining room at the back of the house. I smoothed my linen dress, adjusted the 3 envelopes in my purse, and tried to calm my fluttering nerves. The letters felt like both armor and open wounds, protection and vulnerability in equal measure. I followed the music, recognizing Ella Fitzgerald, Clayton's favorite. The thought brought a sad smile to my face. Was it coincidence, or had Quentin chosen it deliberately as a peace offering? The private dining room was transformed from its usual formal setup. Instead of the long table that normally accommodated groups of 12, Quentin had created an intimate space with a round table set for 4. Candles glowed in the center, and the blinds were drawn against the early evening light, creating a cocoon of warmth. Quentin himself stood at the small service bar, arranging glasses. At 35, he was the image of his father, tall and broad-shouldered, with Clayton's expressive hazel eyes and quick hands. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his chef's whites were crisp despite the day's work. He looked up as I entered, his expression guarded but not unwelcoming. "Mom," he said, putting down the glass he was polishing. "You're early." "Some habits die hard," I replied with a small shrug, though I see I get it honestly. I nodded toward his meticulous preparation. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Laurel's chronically late, and Everett's precisely on time, always. You and I are the early birds." The simple observation, this small thing we shared, eased some of the tension in my shoulders. "Can I help with anything?" He hesitated only briefly before gesturing to the table. "Napkins need folding. I was trying something new." I moved to the stack of deep burgundy cloth napkins and began folding them into simple but elegant triangles. "Where are the kids and spouses tonight?" "Briar took all the cousins for pizza and a movie," Quentin replied, focusing on mixing something in a shaker. "Nash is catching up on work. Piper had a catering job." Piper was Quentin's partner of 3 years, a pastry chef with her own business. They weren't married, but seemed more solid than many couples with rings. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the familiar rhythm of preparation, a language we both spoke fluently. Quentin had started helping me in the kitchen at age 6, standing on a stool to reach the counter. By 12, he was creating his own recipes. At 15, he announced he would become a chef, and neither Clayton nor I had ever doubted him. "I made your potato salad," he said suddenly, still not looking at me. "From memory. For yesterday." The simple admission made my throat tighten. "How did it turn out?" "Not the same," he admitted, finally meeting my eyes. "I forgot how much dill you use." 2 tablespoons, not 1, I said softly. "Your father liked it that way." "I know that now," Quentin replied with a rueful smile, after I'd already served it. The side door opened again, and Everett's voice called out, "Hello, I'm here exactly at 7, as promised." Quentin rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Right on cue. In the back, Ev?" Everett appeared in the doorway, his suit slightly rumpled after a day at the law firm where he was now a senior partner. At 42, his dark hair was beginning to gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look that matched his professional seriousness. He'd always been my most responsible child, the one who planned ahead and considered consequences. "Mom," he said, nodding formally. His eyes moved between Quentin and me, assessing the atmosphere. "Am I interrupting?" "Just finishing the setup," Quentin replied. "Have a seat. First drink's coming up." Everett removed his suit jacket and hung it carefully on a nearby chair before sitting across from me. His movements were precise, controlled, so like me that it was sometimes uncomfortable to watch, like seeing my own mannerisms reflected back with masculine energy. "How are you?" he asked, his tone professional but not cold. "I've been better," I answered honestly, "but I'm here." He nodded, accepting my response without pushing for more. That was Everett, respecting boundaries, sometimes to the point of distance. Quentin approached with a tray of glasses filled with an amber liquid over ice, garnished with orange peel. "Old fashions," he announced. "Dad's recipe." Another deliberate choice. Clayton had been known for his perfectly balanced old-fashioned cocktails, a skill he'd learned from his own father and passed down to our children. "Laurel just texted," Everett reported, checking his phone. "Running late, traffic on the parkway." "Shocking," Quentin deadpanned, taking a seat between us. "We should start without her, or we'll be here all night." "She'd kill us," Everett replied, but there was no real concern in his voice. This was an old, comfortable dynamic, teasing Laurel about her perpetual lateness. We sipped our drinks in silence for a moment, each seemingly reluctant to be the first to address the elephant in the room. The old-fashioned was perfect, sweet, bitter, and strong in precisely the right proportions. Clayton would have approved. "This is good, Quentin," I said sincerely. "Your father would be proud." Something in my son's expression softened. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." Everett cleared his throat. "So, about yesterday." The door burst open, and Laurel rushed in, her curly hair escaping from its clip, cheeks flushed with exertion. Sorry, accident on the parkway and then I couldn't find parking." At 39, my middle child was a whirlwind of energy and ideas, her academic career in cultural studies a perfect match for her constantly questioning mind. "Right on time for the difficult conversation," Quentin remarked dryly, standing to make her drink. "You always did have impeccable timing, sis." Laurel stuck out her tongue at him, a gesture that momentarily transformed her from respected professor to the little girl who had insisted on wearing mismatched socks throughout 3rd grade as a statement against conformity. She kissed my cheek quickly before taking the seat next to me. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for calling," I replied, meaning it. Once Laurel had her drink and Quentin returned to his seat, an awkward silence fell over the table. We had gathered for a purpose, but now that we were face to face, no one seemed to know where to begin. I decided to take the initiative. Reaching into my purse, I withdrew the 3 envelopes and placed them on the table. "I wrote these last night and revised them this morning. They're for each of you." My children exchanged glances, a silent communication flowing between them. "Would you like us to read them now?" Everett asked, practical as always. "Actually," I said, "I'd rather tell you what's in them. Writing helped me organize my thoughts. But I'm here now. We should talk directly." Laurel's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise, and Quentin leaned forward, interested. This wasn't the approach they expected from me. "First," I began, looking at each of them in turn, "I want to apologize. Since your father died, I've become someone I don't particularly like, critical, rigid, and intrusive. I've imposed my standards and opinions on your lives without considering that you're adults with your own valid choices and perspectives." The directness of my apology seemed to startle them. Everett's carefully composed expression faltered, and Laurel blinked rapidly, her usual sign of emotional processing. Quentin stared into his drink, his jaw working. "I didn't realize how my behavior was affecting you," I continued, "or perhaps I didn't want to see it. Either way, I'm sorry for making relationships with me so difficult that excluding me seemed like the only option." "Mom, Laurel started, her voice thick with emotion. We shouldn't have. I held up a hand gently. Please, let me finish. I need to say this. She nodded, settling back in her chair. That said, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. Being excluded from a family tradition I built with your father hurt me deeply. Finding out through social media, having my calls ignored, walking into that silence, it was humiliating and heartbreaking. Quentin winced visibly. Everett's face had settled into the grimace he wore when facing unpleasant facts in a case. We could have handled it better, Everett acknowledged, his lawyer's precision evident even in apology. Much better. It was cowardly, Quentin added bluntly. We took the easy way out. We were conflict avoidant, Laurel offered, ever the academic with the perfect theoretical framing, which is ironic given how direct our family usually is. Usually too direct, I said with a small, sad smile. Except when it really matters, apparently. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. I sipped my drink, giving them space to respond more fully. Everett spoke first, measured as always. When Dad died, everything changed. Not just for you, Mom, but for all of us. He was the buffer, the translator, Laurel added. The peacemaker, Quentin said softly. Everett nodded. Without him, we never developed new ways to communicate with each other, especially with you, Mom. After the funeral, you seemed to get harder, Laurel continued, choosing her words carefully. More critical, less flexible. Like you were channeling your grief into finding fault. At first, we made allowances, Quentin explained. It was still raw for everyone. But then a year passed, and two, and it seemed like the new normal. You pointing out everything we did wrong. Us walking on eggshells around you. Or avoiding you altogether, Everett admitted, his gaze direct but not unkind, which culminated in yesterday's situation. I absorbed their words, recognizing the truth in them, even as they stung. I didn't realize how much your father mediated between us, I said quietly, or how poorly I've handled his absence. We haven't handled it well either, Laurel acknowledged. We should have talked to you directly instead of just complaining to each other. God, the text threads, Quentin muttered, then looked horrified at his admission. Despite the pain of the conversation, I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my throat. You had text threads about me? My children exchanged guilty glances. The mom said what thread? Laurel confessed, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. For particularly pointed comments. And the mom rearranged my kitchen again thread? Quentin added, relaxing slightly. Don't forget, things Mom disapproves of this week, Everett contributed, his serious face finally cracking into a small smile. I should have been offended, but instead I found myself laughing, a genuine if slightly pained laugh. Well, at least you were united about something. They joined in the laughter, tension breaking like ice on a spring pond. For a moment, we were just a family again, finding humor in our dysfunction. As our laughter subsided, Quentin rose. I should check on dinner. Don't solve everything without me. In the brief silence that followed his departure, I looked at my two older children, these remarkable adults who had their own lives, their own struggles, their own wisdom. I'm proud of you both, you know. Of all three of you. I don't say that enough. Laurel's eyes widened slightly. Everett's posture straightened, as if physically affected by the words. What? I asked, noticing their reactions. You haven't said that since Dad died, Everett said quietly. Not directly like that. Had it really been 3 years since I told my children I was proud of them? The realization was stunning and shameful. I've thought it, I said weakly. Many times. We know you love us, Mom, Laurel said gently. That was never in question, but sometimes love gets lost in criticism. I never meant, I began, then stopped myself. Intentions mattered less than impact. I'm sorry, I said instead. I'll do better. Quentin returned, pushing a small cart laden with covered dishes. Dinner is served, he announced. Nothing fancy, just comfort food. He removed the covers to reveal a perfectly roasted chicken, rosemary roasted potatoes, glazed carrots, and fresh rolls, the meal I had made every Sunday for decades. Our family dinner, recreated by my son's skilled hands. Oh, Quentin, I whispered, unexpectedly moved. I figured we needed something familiar, he explained, suddenly shy. Something that reminds us we're family, even when it's complicated. We filled our plates in companionable silence, the simple act of sharing food beginning to heal what words alone could not. The chicken was moist and flavorful, the potatoes crisp outside and fluffy within, executed with professional skill but faithful to my original recipes. "This is delicious," I told Quentin sincerely. "Better than mine, actually." He looked up, surprised. "Really? You think so? The rosemary is fresher and you've added something to the glaze on the carrots." I took another bite, considering. "Ginger? And a touch of maple syrup," he admitted. "Just experimenting." "It works," I assured him. "Sometimes improvements on tradition are exactly right." The double meaning wasn't lost on any of us. Laurel smiled into her water glass, and Everett nodded approvingly. As we ate, the conversation shifted to their lives, updates they would have shared at the barbecue had I been there. Everett's law firm was expanding to a new office in Philadelphia. Laurel had received a research grant to study cultural preservation in rural communities. Quentin was considering opening a second, more casual restaurant focused on sustainable comfort food. "I'd like your input, actually," he said, surprising me. "Not on the menu, that's set, but on the atmosphere. We want it to feel like home cooking, but elevated. You've always had an eye for making spaces feel welcoming." "I'd be honored," I said, meaning it, though I'm surprised you'd want my opinion given how critical I've been. "You're critical because you care," Quentin replied thoughtfully, "and you usually have good instincts. I just need you to remember it's my restaurant, not yours." "Boundaries," Laurel said, nodding. "That's really what this is all about, isn't it? Healthy boundaries." "Always the professor," Everett teased, but his tone was affectionate. "She's right, though," I acknowledged. "I've been crossing boundaries left and right without even realizing it. And we've been avoiding setting them clearly," Everett added. "Both sides have responsibility here." As we finished our meal, the conversation turned to practical matters. How would we handle family gatherings going forward? What new traditions might we create? How could we communicate better when problems arose? "Monthly family dinners might be good," Laurel suggested. "Without spouses or kids sometimes, so we can speak freely. And a clear agreement about feedback," Everett added. "Maybe ask before offering opinions on each other's life choices." "I'd like that too," I said. "It goes both ways, you know. Sometimes I feel like you've all decided I'm this fragile widow who can't handle change, so you don't tell me things until they're already decided." My children exchanged guilty glances again. "Like what?" Quentin asked cautiously. "Like Everett applying for partnership in Philadelphia without mentioning it until the decision was made. Or Laurel changing her research focus and not telling me until the grant was approved. Or you," I looked at Quentin, "house hunting with Piper when you haven't even told me you're thinking about marriage." 3 stunned faces stared back at me. "How did you know about the house?" Quentin asked, incredulous. "Vivian's niece is a real estate agent," I explained. "Small town, remember?" "I was going to tell you," Everett said defensively, "once it was certain." "Same," echoed Laurel. "We thought we were protecting you," Everett admitted, "from worrying or having opinions before things were settled." "I don't need protection," I said firmly. "I need inclusion. Even if I'm not going to love every choice you make, I want to be part of your lives. The process, not just the outcomes." "That's fair," Laurel acknowledged. "But it goes both ways, Mom. You need to respect our decisions even when they're not what you would choose." "I'm learning that," I promised. "Slowly, perhaps, but I am." As Quentin cleared the plates and brought out coffee and a simple apple tart for dessert, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. We hadn't resolved everything. Decades of family dynamics couldn't be untangled in one dinner, but we had made a start. "I have something else to tell you all," I said, as we settled with our coffee. "I've been thinking about making some changes." 3 pairs of eyes focused on me with varying degrees of apprehension. "Nothing dramatic," I assured them. "But I've realized I've been stuck since your father died, living in the past, trying to preserve everything exactly as it was when he was alive." "That's understandable, Mom," Laurel said gently. "Perhaps, but it's not healthy," I replied. "For any of us. So I'm going to make some changes. I've joined the Community Garden Project more officially. Thaddeus Kinsella asked me to help coordinate the educational programs with the elementary school. That's great, Quentin said, looking genuinely pleased. You were always good at organizing those kinds of things. And I'm thinking of taking some classes at the community college, I continued. Art history, maybe, or creative writing. Something just for me. Dad would like that, Everett said, quietly. He always said you put your own interests aside for the family. The mention of Clayton brought a familiar pang, but it wasn't as sharp as usual. He did encourage me to do more things for myself, I agreed. I should have listened sooner. It's never too late to start, Laurel said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. No, it isn't, I agreed. Which brings me to one more thing. I'm considering selling the house. This announcement was met with stunned silence. Are you sure, Mom? Everett finally asked. That house has been in the family for 42 years, I finished for him. And it's full of wonderful memories. But it's also too big for just me, and everywhere I look, I see your father. Sometimes that's comforting, but often it just keeps me looking backward. Where would you go? Laurel asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Maybe a smaller place in town, closer to the community garden. Somewhere I can make new memories while still staying close to all of you. My children exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. If that's what you want, we support you, Quentin said finally, speaking for all of them. But don't rush into anything. I won't, I promised. I'm just starting to consider possibilities. Would you like help looking at options? Laurel offered. Nash's sister is a realtor. Maybe eventually, I said. For now, I'm just getting used to the idea of change. As the evening wound down, I felt a sense of peaceful exhaustion, the kind that comes after necessary, difficult work. We had laid foundations for a new kind of relationship, one based on adult respect rather than the parent-child dynamic that no longer served any of us. We should do this again, Everett said as we prepared to leave. Maybe make it a monthly thing, like Laurel suggested. I'd like that, I agreed. Though next time I'll cook. It's only fair. Deal, Quentin said with a smile, but I get to critique your technique. Fair enough, I laughed. I've certainly critiqued yours enough over the years. One by one, my children hugged me goodbye. Real embraces, not the perfunctory gestures we'd fallen into lately. Quentin held on longest, always the most physically demonstrative of my children. I love you, Mom, he said quietly. Even when you drive me crazy. I love you too, I replied, holding his face in my hands for a moment. All of you, more than you could possibly know. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Montclair, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope, not just for reconciliation with my children, but for myself, for a future that held possibilities beyond mere existence in the shadow of loss. The house was dark when I arrived, no lights left on to welcome me home. But instead of the usual emptiness, I felt a curious sense of anticipation. This house had served its purpose well, sheltering our family through decades of growth, change, and love. But perhaps it was time for these walls to welcome a new family. Time for me to find a space that reflected who I was becoming, rather than only who I had been. I moved through the rooms, turning on lights as I went, seeing the familiar space with new eyes. So many memories lived here. Clayton building a dollhouse for Laurel in the basement workshop, Everett studying for the bar exam at the dining room table, Quentin experimenting with recipes in the kitchen, leaving glorious messes in his wake. But memories didn't disappear when you changed locations. They traveled with you, shaping who you became next. I reached for my phone and called Vivian, knowing she'd still be awake despite the late hour. Well, she answered immediately. How did it go? We talked, I said simply. Really talked, maybe for the first time since Clayton died. And we're going to be okay, I replied, surprised at how certain I felt. Different, but okay. I told you so, Vivian said smugly. Now tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail. As I recounted the evening to my oldest friend, I wandered into Clayton's study, a room I'd left largely untouched since his death. His books still lined the shelves, his reading glasses still sat on the desk, his favorite sweater still hung over the chair, a shrine to absence. I told them I'm thinking of selling the house, I said as I finished my account of the dinner. Good for you, Vivian replied approvingly. It's about time. You think so? Della, honey, I've watched you haunting that house like a ghost for 3 years. Clayton wouldn't want that for you. No, I agreed softly, running my fingers over the spines of his books. He wouldn't. After ending the call with Vivian, I remained in Clayton's study, feeling his presence strongly but differently than before. Not as a painful reminder of loss, but as a loving witness to my tentative steps forward. I'm trying, I whispered to the empty room. I'm really trying. On the desk, a framed photo caught my eye. Clayton and me on our 40th anniversary, 5 years ago. We were dancing, caught mid-laugh, oblivious to the camera. Happy, complete. But what struck me now was not just the couple we had been, but the woman I was in that moment. Joyful, confident, fully present. That woman still existed somewhere inside me, beneath the layers of grief and habit and fear. It was time to find her again. 2 months passed with surprising swiftness. The rhythm of my days changed gradually. Then all at once, like the maple tree in my front yard that held its green through September, then suddenly blazed crimson overnight. The community garden became my sanctuary. 3 mornings a week, I worked alongside Thaddeus and the other volunteers, learning about companion planting and soil amendments. I discovered I had a knack for organization, creating schedules and coordinating the elementary school visits. Children came with their teachers, wide-eyed at the miracle of seeds transforming into food. I taught them to identify herbs by smell, to understand the importance of pollinators, to respect the complex ecosystem thriving in what had once been an abandoned lot. "You're a natural teacher," Thaddeus remarked one afternoon as we watched a group of 3rd graders depart, clutching paper cups with seedlings they'd planted themselves. "You should have been a professor like Laurel." "Perhaps in another life," I replied, not regretfully. "I've had a good one in this one." Our friendship deepened with each passing week. Thaddeus was steady, thoughtful, and refreshingly direct. We shared lunches after garden work days, swapped books, and occasionally attended community events together. Nothing romantic, or at least nothing acknowledged as such, but a companionship that filled empty spaces in both our lives. My relationship with my children transformed too, incrementally but unmistakably. The monthly family dinners became a fixture, rotating between our homes. We established new traditions, a criticism-free zone for the first hour of any gathering, followed by a designated time for constructive feedback, if requested. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and far healthier than what we'd been doing. Everett helped me research smaller homes, bringing property listings and discussing neighborhoods with the thoroughness he applied to everything. Laurel invited me to guest lecture in her class about cultural traditions in mid-century American households, treating me as a valuable primary source rather than just her sometimes difficult mother. Quentin and I cooked together in his restaurant kitchen after hours, experimenting with updated versions of family recipes for his new casual dining concept. As for the house, my decision was made the day I found the perfect buyer. A young couple with 3 small children came to view it, the pregnant mother immediately falling in love with the window seats and built-in bookshelves Clayton had crafted. Their oldest daughter, about 7, asked if she could have the bedroom that had been Laurel's with its sloped ceiling and dormer window. "It looks like a room where you could imagine things," she explained seriously. That sealed it. This house deserved a new family, new stories, new life. I found a garden apartment in a converted Victorian closer to town. Just 2 bedrooms, but with high ceilings, abundant natural light, and a small private patio where I could create a container garden. Most importantly, it was walking distance to the community garden, the library, and Quentin's new restaurant location. The process of downsizing proved both painful and liberating. Each object carried memories. Some I wanted to preserve, others I needed to release. My children helped, each taking pieces of furniture or mementos that held special meaning for them. What remained, I sorted meticulously. Keep, donate, discard, a lifetime distilled to essentials. Clayton's clothes were the hardest. I'd left his closet untouched for 3 years, the door firmly closed. Opening it released the faintest trace of his scent, triggering a wave of grief as fresh as the day he died. Vivian sat with me on the closet floor as I worked through each item, listening as I shared the stories attached to them. The sweater he wore on our first date, the tie from Everett's wedding, the flannel shirts he wore for weekend projects. Some pieces I kept. His favorite cardigan, the scarf I'd knitted him our first Christmas together. The rest we carefully folded for donation. He'd be proud of you, Vivian said as we closed the empty closet for the final time. Moving forward doesn't mean forgetting, you know. I know, I replied, surprised to find I truly did. The day of my move dawned clear and cool, a perfect October morning. My children arrived early with their spouses and older grandchildren, creating an efficient moving brigade. By afternoon, my new apartment was arranged, not fully unpacked, but livable. As they prepared to leave, I noticed my 3 children in a huddle by their cars, clearly discussing something. Finally, Everett approached, carrying a wrapped package about 2 feet square. "We have something for you," he said, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. "A housewarming gift." Inside was a painting, an original watercolor of the community garden in full summer bloom. In the foreground, a silver-haired woman knelt beside a young child, both of them examining a sunflower with expressions of wonder. "Quentin commissioned it from his friend who does the restaurant's art," Laurel explained. "We wanted something that represents who you are now, not just who you were to us growing up." "It's beautiful," I whispered, genuinely moved. "Thank you." After they left, I hung the painting in my new living room, directly opposite Clayton's favorite reading chair, one of the few pieces of furniture I'd brought from the old house. Past and present in conversation, exactly as it should be. That evening, Thaddeus called to see how the move had gone. Our conversation flowed easily, as it always did, until he cleared his throat in a way I'd come to recognize as a prelude to something important. "Della," he began, his usually confident voice tentative, "I was wondering if you might like to have dinner with me tomorrow night, not at Millbrook Diner with the garden group, but just the 2 of us. At Marcello's, perhaps." Marcello's was the most upscale restaurant in town. White tablecloths, candles, a decent wine list. Decidedly not casual. "Thaddeus Kinsella," I said, smiling though he couldn't see it. "Are you asking me on a date?" "I believe I am," he replied, a smile evident in his voice as well, though I confess I'm rather out of practice. "That makes 2 of us," I said. "But yes, I'd like that very much." After we hung up, I sat in Clayton's chair, watching the last light of day filter through my new windows. So much had changed in just 2 months. My home, my relationship with my children, my daily routines, and now, possibly, my heart. The woman who had stood frozen in her kitchen on Independence Day, hurt and indignant at being excluded from the family barbecue, seemed like a different person. Someone I had been, but was no longer. That painful moment had become a catalyst, forcing me to see myself through others' eyes and recognize how stuck I had become. Clayton had been gone 3 years, but in many ways, I had only just begun to truly live without him. Not by forgetting or replacing him, but by carrying forward what he had loved best in me. My strength, my capacity for growth, my ability to love fiercely, even when it was difficult. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The apartment still needed unpacking. My relationship with my children would require ongoing attention and care. Whatever was beginning with Thaddeus would need time to develop naturally. Life would continue to change, as it always had. But for the first time in years, I was moving toward something rather than away from loss. The future held possibilities I couldn't yet imagine, and I was finally ready to discover them. When my doorbell rang the next evening, I opened it to find Thaddeus standing there, neatly dressed in a blazer and holding a small pot of miniature roses. His smile was warm, his eyes appreciative as they took in my blue dress and freshly styled hair. "You look lovely, Della," he said simply. "So do you," I replied, meaning it. "Come in for a moment while I find a place for these beautiful flowers." As I arranged the miniature roses on my new windowsill, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass, a woman of 67, silver-haired and lined by life's experiences, but standing straighter than she had in years. Behind me, I could almost sense Clayton's approving presence, urging me forward as he always had. "Ready?" Thaddeus asked, offering his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. "Yes," I said, taking it. "I believe I am." If you've been through a similar situation with your adult children, please share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you navigated family conflicts and found your way back to each other. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories about rediscovering yourself after loss and rebuilding family relationships. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload.